So 2 weeks ago, I moved into this new studio space where we'll be building all of the stuff, checking out 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC machines. In this video, we're tackling the ceiling rail system. So in my prior apartment, I also had a YouTube studio and I had a little bit of trouble with the space because I didn't have a whole lot of it. So I had a ceiling rail system in the old apartment eventually, which saved me a bunch of space and saved me a bunch of time as well, because all of the lights were just ready to go with a single button. I'm not like looking for power plugs and that kind of stuff. The roof rail system that I personally bought was from Bresser. It was one of the most cheap ones that I could find, and I was very skeptical about it because I've used roof rails in education environments before, and they were always quite a hassle to use, and I never really liked them. So I went for this, and I thought like if there's anything I would ever want to modify on it, then I'd just modify it with a 3D print or CNC part. And that kind of brings us to the sponsor for today's video as well. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, longtime supporter of the channel. They offer a bunch of prototyping services ranging from PCB production and assembly, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, and 3D printing. So if you ever need any custom parts produced in very high quality, maybe printed in metal, for example, you can definitely use PCBWay to get your project sorted out. So I left some links in the description down below. Definitely check them out. This new space is really awesome because it's very accommodating for a ceiling rail system like this, as it's very high. It's 3 meters high instead of the 2 meters 40 that most apartments here in the Netherlands are. And my prior apartment, when I had it on the ceiling, felt very claustrophobic. It felt like the ceiling was kind of falling down on you. In this case though, I'd like to add an additional frame so that we can always upgrade stuff later down the line, or maybe exchange it for a different type of rail system. So the way we're going to be going about this is by using 25mm tubing. And this is somewhat similar to Brooklyn pipes, I believe, or scaffold tubing, but it's square, so it's a lot easier to actually mount stuff onto this. So drilling holes into the ceiling can be quite intense, but after we have some holes drilled in there, we can use some of these anchor bolts to hold the whole system up. And these are M6, they're quite strong, they can hold quite a lot of weight. I have had these kind of snap off if you tighten them too much though, so you need to keep that in mind. But we'll be using 8 of these to hold the entire system at 4 points. You can see that I only mounted it at 1 point, and that's because I'm first going to be adding the second plug over here, and then I'm going to be adding the metal bar in between the two, and then marking out where we need to drill the second hole. And this just saves a little bit of time, so I don't have to measure everything and check if everything's straight or not. This just makes it a lot easier to line stuff up. So in terms of the drill that I'm using here, I just borrowed this one from my granddad. I don't know the exact specifications on it. I do know that you want a drill with quite high of a joule count, and you can check that out in the specifications. But if you don't have a proper drill for a project like this, it can be extremely difficult to do and feel almost impossible. And you also need one of these detectors to actually figure out where the metal rebar is, and that way you won't be hitting metal when you're drilling these holes. So this video is very different from the content that I normally upload to the channel, but I somewhat need a transitioning period to actually get the entire studio up and running with video content about it. Otherwise the channel kind of dies off. So I really appreciate it if you'd leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. But also let me know if you enjoy this type of content, because I am building a second studio in the space next door, which is a little bit larger, and it might be fun to produce some content about that as well. So I've already built some acoustic panels which are 120 centimeters by 60 centimeters, and to actually mount those on the ceiling we need a center bar. So I'm using some of these additional corner pieces to mount some extra bars onto the side, and that will allow me to add the centerpiece to the entire construction. And that's also very useful for the rail system, so that we can mount it in the center as well, instead of it just being mounted on the outer edges of the rail. So in this video, we're not actually hanging up the acoustic panels yet, but I was like checking it, seeing how it would fit in this space and seeing if it would work nicely. In terms of echo, it's quite a lot roomier than the other space that I had, so it's not as bad as I had imagined it to be. You can hear in my voice right now, there's no acoustic panels in the space at this moment in time, and it's quite doable in terms of listening to it. So after doing that test fit and checking if everything was really secure on the ceiling, took everything down again because we need to mount some of these plates. And these plates are a little bit upgraded in the newer version of the Bresser ceiling rail system. So you'll get one that you can actually screw down, and that way the rails don't actually move when you're moving the system. So I'm mounting the two main rails quite a ways inwards from the sides, and that has to do with the acoustic panels. I'd like some room to have a full acoustic panel on one side, but it also has to do with the reach of the system, right? So if you put it right at the edge, then you can't move it that way anymore. Whereas if you put it right on the side over here, you still have some room to actually shove the bottom bar a little bit that way, but also rotate it. You also notice that in the footage right here, where we're drilling some holes into these metal tubes, that it looks really bad because we have two walls which are yellow, right? Normally in every single other studio that I've designed for clients and for myself, I would never, make two of the walls a color because it would create a color cast. Especially with the yellow, it creates a green color cast. In this case though, I know that I have control over the lighting situation. And so, as you can see in the footage later down the line, it looks a lot better because we're actually using grids on our lighting equipment to control where the spill is going to be. And if we have very little spill, then everything will be okay. After we have all of those plates mounted, we can hang it all back up onto the ceiling. You might actually want to make sure to leave enough room on either side of it so that you can slide it all the way through and then slide it back into place. Because in this case, it hit the wall before it could actually slide it into the other one. And so we have to do it from a specific side. And at this point, you also notice why Bresser made an upgrade to the mounting situation where you actually bolt it into place. Because with the system that I have here, they can very easily just slide out, which has never actually happened before because there's quite a lot of friction there. But you could see that if you wouldn't mount it in the center as well, then it could just fall off the ceiling. I'm actually looking for a ceiling rail for the other studio as well. So if you have any suggestions on one that you've used, which is, on the budget side of things, not 7 or 8K, that's not within my budget, then definitely let me know in the comments down below as well. It would be really awesome to include in a future video. To keep the rails from actually rolling out of their sockets, they do come with these little pucks, which you just screw onto the end caps over there. I did this for all of them, so none of them can actually fall out. And after we did all that, we can add the pantographs. And the pantographs are probably the most frustrating part of this entire system, but also the most necessary part of the entire system. So this is just what allows us to move the lights up and down. It comes with a spring, which is on the inside, and it works in the same way as a tape measure, essentially. And the lights that I'm adding to the system are mostly Amaran lights, so pretty much every light in this space is from Amaran so that we can control it via the application, which is Silas Link. In this case, we're using two of these Amaran 300Cs, which are full color RGB lights and 300 watts, so quite powerful. And that's also necessary for this space because there's a lot of natural light coming in at this moment in time. Now, one of these lights I'm adding a spotlight SE, which is another attachment from Amaran. I won't go into too much details on how I actually light my videos, but this allows you to put gobos in there. On the other light, I'm putting this massive softbox, which is 140 centimeters. The larger the modifier, the softer the light, and you can definitely see this shot over here, where we change over to that softbox, how much it changes the dynamic of the video, right? And you can see that there's a lot less color cast from the yellow walls. And this is how I'll primarily be using this in the videos. In the next shot though, I'm bouncing another light off the ceiling, and that's where the color cast is coming in again. At this point, we can use some zip ties to actually zigzag a cable upwards, and this is just so that we can move the pantograph up and down without it snagging on anything. It also comes with a couple cable casters to manage the cables that are being routed to the power supply. In this case, I'm using some zip ties to add some extra power plugs to the metal structure at the top. But I would actually like to create a power control box where each individual power source goes in and has its own separate switch, so that from a single point in the studio, maybe on the desk setup, for example, I could switch each light on and off because I don't have all the lights on all of the time. And sometimes they're up high, so you can't actually reach them and you can't turn them off. Like those lights that are back there, which are not actually on the roof rail system. That's a separate bar, and I just use some clamps to clamp those into place. But those are more stationary lights that I don't need to, you know, move around constantly. As for how it is in use, sometimes it is quite annoying, and I don't think you should have too high expectations. Like going into this with saving floor space, that's definitely useful. moving them around constantly can be quite a hassle, especially if you have massive modifiers on them. They can be a little bit difficult to move up and down the rails. I'd personally also designed the system a little bit different to where it has casters on both sides and a spring system which pushes the bottom casters into the rails. And that way, if you're moving it around, it doesn't latch upwards and block it from moving. And the pantographs also have a locking mechanism in there, so you can use your thumb to actually unlock it and then move the entire thing down. And then it locks back into place to where it doesn't fall down even further. But it doesn't have a lock for going back upwards. So if the light that you're putting on this thing isn't heavy enough, it just, it loops back up. But in general, once you get used to having a system like this, it's very difficult to go back to having normal light stands in a studio like this because all of the cables are managed as well, which means that if you're shooting from different angles, you never have to do a cleanup session where you need to make sure that the shot looks good. All of the cables are just up there, and usually I'm shooting kind of down over the shoulder and that kind of stuff. It is a little bit of a hassle to use sometimes, but I can definitely recommend it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful, and I hope it gave you some inspiration for your own studio build. See you in the next one.